Hello, we are live, so I'm glad for that. Uh, Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm Lauren Van Hemert from RDU on Stage, and I'm with Chris Timmons from Theater Charlotte. You're the Associate Artistic Director there, and sadly, you had a fire there a couple of weeks ago, which so many of my friends in Raleigh were sharing with me, which is why I really wanted to talk to you and bring this to our Triangle audiences, because there's so many people who love Theater Charlotte because it's an institution. So
Absolutely.
thank you for being here with me.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, as always, put them in the chat and we will try to get to them. Before we talk about what's happened in the last couple of weeks, I want to talk about the history of Theater Charlotte, because I was blown away by the history. I love historic theaters, and this certainly is a historic place in Charlotte, an institution. So tell me a little bit about the history of Theater Charlotte.
So the organization that became Theater Charlotte started in 1927, and there was a time where men were off to war and women were back in the States and doing everything. So it was part of the Little Theater movement, and eventually, after sort of bouncing around from place to place throughout the city of Charlotte, they did performances at an orphanage. They finally settled on this little plot of land on Queens Road in the Myers Park district of Charlotte. So it was a great location in terms of how where I guess the trolley and the transportation system was there at the time. And you can still see some of those bus stops that have made it through from all of the rebuild that's happened in Charlotte. But in 1941 is when they did their first production in the building that is Theater Charlotte, or is our current facility, our current home. And it closed just before the attack on Pearl Harbor. So, thinking about, everything that's happened from 1927 through now, even yesterday, all of the things that this organization and has been through, it's quite remarkable just to think about. What has sort of stood out, I think, among most people is that Theater Charlotte has produced a season of theater every year since 1927. So throughout all of those things, and again, I won't go through the history lesson, but through all of those things, this theater has continued to produce a season of theater every year. So.
And for those doing the math, that's 90. This was going to be the 90, or this is the 93rd season, because you've continued programming even the pandemic.
Yes.
Which is incredible to me. Not too many theaters can boast 93 seasons.
No, yeah. And certainly, the building obviously certainly has shown signs of its age, 1941, but yeah, it's a remarkable feat for any arts group. There's just so much, it's constantly an uphill battle.
It is, particularly in 2020, which we're going to get to in a minute. Like most community theaters, a lot of Broadway stars have cut their teeth and gotten their footing literally on the stage at Theater Charlotte. Most recently, Renee Rapp was in the 2019 production of Spring Awakening and went on to get a starring role, a principal role in Mean Girls as Regina George on Broadway. Who are some of the other kind of well-known alumni that have come out of Theater Charlotte?
It's a long list, and I would hate to leave anybody off. And it's one of those things where we have this summer program, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little while, but that has really fed a lot of these the young stars through. But in addition to that, there are some people that sort of stand out to me that have also worked behind the scenes. Jim Gloucester, who is a production designer and I think is a producer on Veep, if I've got that correct. He's won a couple of Grammys or some Emmys. Sorry, Emmys. He was a previous technical director at Theater Charlotte. Andrew Leach, who has been working in California for several years, has also been a part of that team. There was a girl who worked with me for a few years from her junior and senior year from Providence High School, who now works for Disney as an Imagineer. So, it spans the gamut. It's from performers to behind the scenes and film, TV, theater. It's great. It's awesome to be able to be a part of that.
And to me, the beauty of community theater is that truly, if you have any interest, whether it's backstage or on stage, you can really roll up your sleeves and get your footing on our community stages, which is why I think institutions like Theater Charlotte are just so important. Last March, like many theaters, you were in tech for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and then the world shut down.
Yeah.
And
how many times have you had to say that?
Everything shut down.
Yeah.
And like so many theaters around the country, you all really did the proverbial pivot and reimagine ways to deliver programming and tell stories. So what have you been doing since March to not just keep Theater Charlotte's name in front of the community, but really to engage the community?
Yeah, it feels like so long ago. So much has happened, and for us, we've all the staff, we've all kind of had to learn new things, learn new mediums, video production, dealing with technology and programs like StreamYard and some of these other platforms out there. It's just been kind of a whole new experience for us. So we did, we started by doing a lot of virtual programming. We did some radio shows, which were a lot of fun. It engaged a lot of our performers, and I guess the benefit of that, of where we are with this technology, is that we can engage people that aren't just in Charlotte, in our community. So we had some performers that we knew that could get involved with that weren't around the corner. So that kept us connected. We did this thing called Quarantine the Musical, which kind of took off. You never know what people are going to grab onto, but it was this idea that we were producing a musical in quarantine, and people were taking original works or music and putting their own lyrics into it related to being in quarantine. So that was a lot of fun. And then we cast it. We did this program, this TC at Home program, where we spoke with some of those performers and a production team. We put together a production team and talked about it as if it was this show that we were producing. And it was a lot of fun. It showcased our talent. It got people involved, excited about just doing theater and not being so cooped up in their everyday life. And then once we were able to, we started doing some parking lot concerts out in our wonderful parking lot in the middle of summer. And then that went into the fall, and we were able to do a couple of shows prior to this fire. So we closed out, we did 3 actual productions. 2 of those involved live audiences. So we did what I did last summer in August, and that we did in our parking lot, and then we filmed it on stage for streaming. And then we did a fully streamed production of vintage Hitchcock. And then we closed out our season with, or at least 2020, we closed that out with A Christmas Carol, which we ended up filming on stage for streaming. And then we did 4 outdoor performances in December that were sold out. People were really excited for that. So, and we did that in conjunction with Christ South. They have a beautiful space, like 13 acres. So there's plenty of room to stretch out, and it was just well received. It was really nice.
And I'm sure other organizations, we have a couple of local theaters here who have tiptoed into the live the live programming in the last month or two. What type of COVID protections, what type of COVID protocols were you putting in place to do A Christmas Carol, or what I did last summer? What kind of protections or precautions were in place for that?
For A Christmas Carol, we offered in-person and video auditions first and foremost, and we made it clear at the time we weren't certain what the protocols and the federal regulations were going to be come December. So we approached it with the understanding that we may not be performing for a live audience, but we needed to approach it as if we were. It's live theater first and foremost. It's not a movie, and we have treated all of our virtual programs as such. But that being said, we knew we were going to have to get people sort of in the same environment. So that was something else that we wanted to make clear up front, that if you weren't comfortable performing with other people, that this wasn't the opportunity. We'll have other opportunities down the road. So that was first and foremost. But we were wearing masks the whole time up until the very last minute, and we did our best to keep everybody separated, not only when they were on stage but in the audience. We had a protocol where they came in, and just simple things like they put a piece of tape on the back of the seat they were sitting, so we knew at the end of the night where everybody was and we could properly clean those areas. We had hand sanitizer and everything backstage by all the props. We were tracking props and making sure that multiple people weren't touching props. We had 3 or 4 versions of Scrooge's watch because 3 different people touched it at any given time. So and everybody was very amenable to those situations. And if anybody, we made it very clear up front that if there was anything that they didn't feel comfortable with, that we would talk about it, and we would make sure that we did it in a safe way. And then, we did make some casting decisions based on being able to get people that were in the same bubble, that allowed us to create some intimacy within the show that we felt was integral. So those were things. And the evolution of that script started back in the summer, because that's a show that we're used to having 30 or 35 people in it. And so we scaled it way back, and we knew that was going to be the case early on. So we've tried to maintain some of those protocols throughout. And I'm sure as we, move forward, we'll have to, we just kind of play it, day by day and situation by situation. But, we're certainly getting input from others in the community and seeing how they're handling things and so on and so forth.
Do you think that you mentioned the virtual streams? I love that you mentioned that it's live. Feels like live theater first, and we're not filmmakers, we're not movie makers. So I love that you said that. Do you think these virtual streams in the long run are going to hurt theaters, or will they help theaters maybe gain a new audience that maybe didn't go to the theater before?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit of both. I think there's going to be a place for it. I think it will give us an opportunity to reach other audiences that we maybe couldn't have before. It's not going to replace live theater. We know that. Anybody can tell you that. It's not going to, I think for our base subscribers and donors and things like that, they want to see us back in that space and they want to interact with us. So I think for them, having the virtual stuff is not going to replace that. I think there is a place for it. What I've being a designer or a production person foremost, that's where I feel like the biggest gap is, it's easy for performers to come on to a screen and perform a song or, have some interaction like this. But, what do you do if you're a scenic designer or a lighting designer? I mean, in this sort of environment, what do you do? It's so different. So again, yeah, I think there's going to be a place for it, and time will tell what that place is. And I think for the immediate future, it's something that we're going to have to rely on. But long term, I think certainly once we can get back to live theater, and maybe it's a combination. I mean, maybe we integrate some of this technology into live performance. And so we're connecting with audiences in California, but the actual production is being done in Charlotte, or, we've got performers all over. I can see some things like that happening.
And I wondered too, I know Raleigh Little Theater was also built, I guess, in the 40s. And so they don't fall under all the accessibility guidelines that they have now, the ADA guidelines. Your building is probably the same way when it comes to accessibility, as most old buildings are. So maybe I know in some of the interviews I've done, this accessibility piece has been talked about as being a positive, as an outcome of virtual theater, that it's making it more accessible. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a part of it that is, we have this technology, we can embrace it, but there's also a part of, there are people out there that struggle with this technology. They want to be involved, they want to see what we are doing, but it's a challenge. Either, they're just not exposed to it. So that's another responsibility I think that we all have, if we're going to embrace this, and we have, is communication, is getting, informing people on how this technology works and how we can use it.
Yes, and it's interesting you mentioned the designers. I just watched Irish Rep's production of Meet Me in St. Louis, and it was the first virtual stream where really the set designer played such an integral part, because whoever designed the set, the actors were all in different locations, all using green screens, and there was this set being projected behind them. So they all kind of looked like they were in the same place. And so my husband walked in and said, all right, making some advances. It's amazing, actually, in less than a year, how much theaters have come to be able to use the technology. So it's kind of exciting to see, although I miss live. I like live.
Yes. It's been so, when we were doing the virtual stuff, it was kind of fun to connect with people that we hadn't seen for a while. And, you're kind of, it's a little invasive in ways, because you're seeing into people's homes and their bedrooms and whatever. And that's, that sort of takes some of your relationships to a different level. But just this idea of, how we deal with this technology and where we take it from there is just a whole other thing that we have to consider and think about moving forward.
Absolutely. In one news report I read from back in September, I think it was the Charlotte Observer, I'm not sure where it was, it had reported that the Theater Charlotte had lost about $150,000 in revenue. That's prior to so what impact financially had the pandemic itself, has the pandemic had on the organization?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the latest numbers are. It's been hard to keep up, and it's such a hard, it's a difficult variable to quantify. We have to do that almost every year when we go through audits and grant writing and things like that. But and the question that always comes up, we put in projections. We project that a show will make X dollars or sell. You never know. You don't know from 1 minute to the next what people are going to want to see. They can put it down in a survey. Oh, that's and that can rank the highest show on the survey, and you put it in your season and it tanks. Nobody comes to see it. And there are so many variables that you don't know. And it's been really a challenge, and everybody in the arts is going through that. Like, how do you quantify? You can say that you might have sold so many tickets for a show,
Right.
and that these might have been what your expenses were, but you don't know. And then this was also an election year, which also historically has been challenging in our second slot of the season. Is especially in a year like this with such high tensions and things like that, there's a good chance that whatever show was second on our list would have struggled to bring people in, because people are just preoccupied. It's just, there's so many variables. It's hard to quantify.
It definitely is. And so people know. So is Theater Charlotte a nonprofit? I'm guessing it
Yes.
is.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been a lot of attention paid to the Save Our Stages Act, or legislation, which just passed. But Nate from Arts North Carolina and I had a conversation earlier this year that really organizations like Theater Charlotte and the nonprofits, those are pretty low down on the tiers that are going to get those monies. So I guess for the public, although you're hearing a lot about Save Our Stages, theaters like Theater Charlotte, the nonprofit organizations, arts organizations, really do need our support. Because
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's one of those things where a lot of people see the billions of dollars that are being directed towards any given thing. But you're right. Once it trickles down to, that's got to be divided up. And we've had several examples here in Charlotte. The arts, we were pushing a tax incentive, I guess it was 2 years ago, that was up for vote, that didn't pass. And that would have generated a lot of revenue locally to the arts, and certainly would have, had a big impact on things happening now. And then we had all of this money that filtered into North Carolina that didn't make it to Mecklenburg County. So, we were left off of a huge chunk of money that wasn't filtered down locally. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of everybody is suffering, and everybody's trying to reach for, whatever they can. And we certainly have been successful in finding some funding that has kept us going. But it's not the same. It's not the same as ticket sales. When we do a streaming show, we've been running Christmas Carol now for since December 13th, and it's not going to replace the 13 performances that we would have had of 220 seats in our theater. It's just not. It's not. And nobody that I've talked to is finding an equal balance between the ticket sales from live performances and streaming.
Yeah. No, it definitely it's definitely not the same. So for people who don't know already, last month, about 2 weeks ago, maybe, there was, on top of the pandemic, a fire in the building. So talk to me about what happened in those wee hours of the morning.
So my phone was lighting up. The funny thing is, looking back at this, is it was a rough night. I wasn't sleeping anyway. So I don't know if that says anything about how connected we are to the building. My wife and I, neither one of us were sleeping. And we were both burning up. It was incredibly hot for some reason, although it wasn't outside. But my phone was lighting up, and I got this message from our security system saying that that the alarm was going off. And I ignored it. at first because I thought usually if it's a false alarm, they send the police out, they do a sweep. If there's nothing, that we never hear anything else about it. But then I started getting all of these, it was just text after text after text. And then I got another phone call and I answered it. And, it was sort of unassuming. The police are on site. There's been a fire. They need somebody to go that represents the theater, represents the building. So I got up thinking that I was going to meet a police officer on site. He was going to show me where they had seen some smoke, taken a fire extinguisher to it, write up some paperwork, and that was going to be the end of it. And I'll never forget this, but I drive around the corner and the sky is just lit up with fire trucks and the road is closed in both directions. So yeah, I got there about 2:30. The fire had been going for a while. It started underneath our auditorium on the house right side. It was an electrical fire and had been smoldering for a while. And then it wasn't until 5:30 or just, I think it was around a little before 5 before I was able to get in the building after the fire department cleared it. And just the look, to walk in there and see a giant hole in the floor and the ceiling crumbling and the water dripping and everything was just, something that I'll always remember. And it's taken a while. Your first thought is just the devastation of that moment. But, having been in there many times over, meeting with dozens of people since then, it's, just got to sort of break it down into small sections and think about it in components. So most of the fire was contained to the auditorium space, but there's smoke damage throughout the building. Everything has to be taken out and cleaned. And for anybody that knows a theater, especially one that's been in the same spot for 80 years, to have to take everything out and inventory and guess what the values are of things and sort of go through this process. It's going to be a long process.
And we're flashing some pictures of the interior of the theater, the damage that has been done. Initially, the fire department and kind of the authorities suggested that there was $50,000 of damage. You told the Charlotte Observer that didn't take into account the equipment and the inventory inside the building. So talk to me about the damage and maybe guesstimates on how much damage there's been, because I think people hang on to that $50,000 value and they're not taking into account the lights and the costumes and everything else that a theater has inside it.
Yeah. And that's, we did reach out to the fire department early on and say, this number is just not realistic. I mean, and they did clarify in that article about how they come about coming up with that number. And it's basically based on what they feel is the immediate damage from the fire itself, not smoke damage, not fighting the fire. What the fire department has to do to get the fire under control and all of those things. So that's in and of itself. And then you've got the actual inventory, and theater inventory is so expensive. It's not like just going down to Home Depot and putting a couple lamps in your living room. It's, it's just an incredible expense. So that's actually where I've been the last couple of days, is just going through an inventory list of trying to come up with numbers related to the equipment. And, where it's going to be, we sort of have two components to what this restoration process will be. And one is the immediate removal and mitigation of the equipment in the building and cleaning of the smoke damage. And then the auditorium is sort of being treated as a separate entity because that will involve contractors sort of building that. And we anticipate that entire floor structure will have to be rebuilt in the auditorium. because it also falls under, you know, issues with code. Once it gets to a certain percentage, then we have to bring that whole floor system up to code, which again is going to be way more than $50,000. But yeah, the inventory, that's been a fun exercise, you know, and I can't, you know, I'll put a couple of values out there, but these are just preliminary. But, you know, our curtains, all of our curtains have to be replaced because the fire retardant on them has been compromised either through water or smoke damage. That's at least a $20,000 replacement there. We anticipate at least 75% of our lighting equipment has been lost. A big part of that is our dimmer rack. We don't know the damage from that. That's at least a $50,000 unit, in addition to the lighting equipment, which is probably upwards of $75,000 to $100,000. Our entire sound system has been destroyed because it was all of the components of our sound were in that room. So that's, you know, who knows, another $20,000 or probably $30,000, if not more, just in that equipment. So, and again, then we've got furniture throughout the building. We've got decades of props and scenery that we've got to pull out bit by bit and decide, is it worth keeping? Is it worth sending off to be restored and cleaned? Or do we just, you know, call it a loss and throw it in the dumpster? So it's going to be a process.
Another, you know, historic building, any historic entity has archival photographs, documents, ephemera from the years and decades that they've been in operation. Were any archival items from the theater lost in the fire?
There's nothing that I can think of off the top of my head that I've run across or that I know that's in the building that is of any historic or I guess substantial emotional value. I mean, obviously everything is there's an emotional attachment to it. You know, there is a picture of our the first artistic director, Tom Humble, that was hanging above the stage. He's been watching all of the shows over the past you know, several decades. That will most likely be taken out to be restored or at least evaluated for smoke damage. You know, fortunately, during the fighting of the fire, the curtain was closed at some point, so that kept most of the heat from penetrating backstage. You know, there's you know, some pictures and photographs that are personal items, you know, from the staff that work there. There's several pictures from my daughter that are laying on the floor throughout, but I don't think there's anything historical. We have a lot of archival photos that were in the back in our green room, which are probably okay. And, you know, a lot of our archives are at the library. We've done a pretty good job taking some of that stuff to the library because of the history of the theater and its connection to the building. I do have one piece, and we talked about this a little while ago.
Yes.
And I'm going to show this because it's very smoky. Anything that we've brought from our house, from the theater, has just got this layer of smoke. This is a newspaper article from 1946 about a play that was designed to remove the mortgage from the theater at the time. And it shows a picture here. Maybe we'll try to get a good picture of this and post it on our website. But that's the original building back in 1941 as it was. But the interesting thing I found about this, and this was in Ron's office, but I was reading through this, and this is not the first fire that this organization has been through. Prior to being in this building on Queens Road, they were in the Presbyterian College Auditorium on College Street in Charlotte. I'm sure that building is not around anymore, knowing how quickly we tear down buildings in Charlotte. But there was a fire in that building, and I'm going to read this little excerpt because I find it amusing, and it just sort of shows, I think, how we as theater people have to think about some of these things. But this is a quote from Dottie Knox, who said, "About all that seemed to have been saved was a coffin, a chicken, a steak, and an apple, all looking amazingly realistic." So that was another example. They had this fire at this building, and all of the costumes and set pieces were lost. They were able to save the building, and I don't, there's not a clear timeline on here, but they stayed in that building for a few more years until it was finally condemned. And I think that sort of prompted the movement towards this space on Queens Road, where they took this lot and built this, theater that we've been in ever since. But again, just the humor involved with the item, just
the irony.
yes.
You mentioned Ron Law, and I do want to bring him up because he did announce that he was going to retire. He announced his retirement last year, and the end of his term was going to be January 31st. He's been there for 15 years. And I guess we should say in the middle of the pandemic, before the fire, we had the murder of George Floyd, this uprising. Theater Charlotte, like so many theaters, issued a solidarity statement. But Ron really has been credited with really being proactive in equity, diversity, inclusion, color conscious casting. Can you talk about the legacy he's going to leave behind to the theater and to the Charlotte arts community?
Yeah, he's been instrumental in the rebirth of this organization. Getting audiences back into the building and expanding the programming, reaching some new limits with the show selection, shows that we've been producing, and getting people excited about that. And, certainly performers, engaging, the entire community. And you hear those stories just over and over again. I was just talking to a fellow, a director and actor recently, who just talked about the kindness that Ron and Theater Charlotte had shown him coming to this community, just from, just coming here with nothing and wanting to get involved. And, he had been going through a divorce at the time, and just the kindness that Ron had showed, given to him and welcoming him into the Theater Charlotte family. So, there are numbers of stories like that. And certainly connecting, the theater back into the arts community and sort of establishing those relationships and open dialogue between theater groups. The summer programming that we've done with, you mentioned Renee Rapp, and Ron's been, heading that, our Student Theater Guild program and our TC Junior programs, which are middle school and high school through college age students. It's a summer intensive. And he's been really, involved with that, and connecting with the youth, the future of our theater, early on, and getting them excited about, what possibilities there are. So, yeah, I mean, there's certainly definitely a legacy there. And 15 years has been probably, he will tell you, it's probably felt like 30 or 40 for us. I've been there 13, and I think it's felt like at least 2 years since the fire for me. So, yeah, I mean, that's a long time for anybody, especially when you consider, like we've talked about, the uphill battle that the arts face for all that we do. It's a long time.
Can you paint a picture for me? Because I'm not in Charlotte, and I'm certainly not familiar with the Charlotte theater community as I am here in the Triangle. Is it a close-knit art community? Because it seems like, just from the articles I was reading, Tom Gabbard, I read an article where Ron was saying that Tom Gabbard over at Blumenthal encouraged him to do the full Monty and said he had to do the full Monty. And I love this kind of collaboration and communication. So is Charlotte a very close-knit arts community?
It absolutely is. Everybody kind of knows everybody else. You see actors who come in and, they start yes, it is. It very much is. You see people bounce around from place to place. You see that communication. I'll say this to all the actors who may be out there watching that, but when you go and audition for a show, you're auditioning for the community, whether it's, you're auditioning for Theater Charlotte or at CPCC or, anywhere else. That your reputation, how you conduct yourself, gets around. We all talk about that. We all have discussions. We get on the phone after a series of auditions and say, what do you think about this person? Or, this stage manager or scenic designer, how did they work for you? So absolutely, it's a tight-knit community. And the support is certainly very strong. It always has been, but we've seen it certainly since the fire of organizations just offering space, storage space or performance space. We all sort of have this battle. I think that we're sort of underdogs. The arts are these underdogs trying to, and it doesn't make sense for us to be divided. You sort of, and we're seeing this in the pandemic. During the pandemic, all of these arts groups are coming together and sort of putting themselves out as a full front for funding and for recognition. And, that's how the arts are in Charlotte. We sort of come at it anytime that, we need to borrow equipment or whatever advice, you pick up the phone and you just make some phone calls, and we feel comfortable doing that.
I love that. And I do definitely think that the pandemic has connected the arts community, and at least here in the Triangle, in a way that it wasn't completely connected like that before. Artistic producers, I know, have spent a lot of time on the phone and in Zoom meetings. And so I love the collaborative and communication in the community, communal nature of it. I know there are, so many people here in the Triangle shared with me the news of this fire. So I know there's so much love for Theater Charlotte from the Triangle. What are next steps, and what can the public do to support Theater Charlotte? And where does the organization go from here?
Yeah, those are a lot of questions that we all have. So, we're sort of, again, we just sort of have to chip away at it bit by bit. And I think the big takeaway for all of us is that we will rebuild, and we will come through this hopefully with something that is even more exciting and more that changes the entire theater experience from the minute you pull into the parking lot and you walk up to those doors. We want this to be something that's even better than it was before. What we have to do is we have to figure out how to get there. So, for me, it's been a lot of meeting with insurance adjusters and contractors and restoration services and all of that stuff. So that's sort of the immediate what's happening now kind of thing, is we're sort of assessing what all is in there and how it has to be treated. And the community support, the volunteer support has been outstanding, and we want to get them involved. And for anybody who has signed up, I promise, we'll get back to you. But there's a lot of this that has to be done by professionals just because of the cataloging and insurance and all of that. So, we would love to turn loose volunteers into the building, and we could make very quick work of it, I'm sure, with all of the community support of getting stuff out of that building. But it has to happen in a very methodical manner. Yeah, I mean, again, if you look at the silver lining, the timing of this is, I hate to say this, but it couldn't have happened at a better time. We didn't have audiences in the building. We couldn't have expected to have audiences until probably at least next fall. So if anything were going to happen, this is the time for it to happen, so that we can, again, we've had offers from the community in terms of performance spaces and things like that. So we're going to engage people in that fashion. We're heading into some colder weather, even for the Carolinas. So, it's not like we can offer outdoor performances. So unfortunately, we're going to have to look at, again, what can we do in front of a screen? But this is an opportunity for us to engage the community that want to be engaged, the performers, the designers, technicians who want to offer their services and their creativity. That's what we're looking at. We've got to look at how we can do that. And we've got to continue programming. We've got a few months before we can start looking at outdoor performances and things like that, where we can invite smaller audiences to see what we have to offer. But until then, we'll look at how we can get the full community engaged. And then, certainly money helps too. We won't turn that aside. So, people have money and services, trades. That's going to be a big thing moving forward, is if we can, engage, especially people that, we have a affinity for people that are local. And I say that not just local to Charlotte, but local to North Carolina and the region. Local companies, North Carolina-born companies, we'll say South Carolina too. They're just right on the border. But if there are people out there that have some services that they can offer, goods, things like that moving forward, that's certainly something that we're looking at. And donations. You've got our website up there, and that's a great place to go. We're updating our Facebook page and our Theater Charlotte website with updates as we have them from adjusters and contractors and things like that. So we want to keep people informed. We want to be transparent in what we're putting out there, so that if there's somebody out there that says, "Oh yeah, I can certainly help with that," then reach out to us and we'll have that conversation.
Absolutely. And the website is theatercharlotte.org. On Facebook, on social media, I found Theater Charlotte very easily, but I know on Twitter, Instagram, it's at Theater Char.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook is at Theater Charlotte, right?
It's Theater Charlotte, just one word, Theater Charlotte.
Theater Charlotte. And theater is with the RE. So I hope everybody will follow. You've been with Theater Charlotte for 13 years. What has 2020 taught you about arts leadership? Or leading an arts organization?
Yeah, it's not easy. Yeah, it's such a, Ron had said this to me, and he had said this during a meeting at some point during this, that theater is a risk. And I think that's certainly more evident now than it ever has been. Mm-hmm. But in talking to other arts leaders and theater leaders and artists, I think what I take away from all of this is just how important it is to individuals, to families, to just to have an outlet. I mean, just, again, thinking back to having auditions for a show this year and people just being so grateful to be on a stage and have an opportunity, whether they were cast in a show or not, but just to have an opportunity to get that out there, that off their chest, and just perform a monologue or whatever, just meant so much to people, and it just reinforces, I think, our purpose, that we're there to serve people, and we're there to give them a voice and a platform to be themselves, or whatever that may mean to them. It certainly, we're all challenged by the technology and the virtual aspect of it, and it's, you know, thinking about what that means moving forward. We you know, certainly hit on that a little bit. But yeah, I think for me, it's just reinforcing how important theater is. And also, you know, we've all adapted. I mean, this theater as a practice, if you will, has adapted for centuries, you know, to whatever has been going on. We've found a way. We have found a way to perform theater. Now we're bringing it right into your home. You know, we're coming right at you with live theater, or as close to live theater as we can. So I guess maybe nothing is safe at this point.
No, and like you said, there's just nothing like that live experience, and I look um forward to coming to Charlotte and experience. I mean, one thing that these live chats have done for me is cast a little bit wider net and allowed me to have the opportunity to interview you and Tom Gabbard from Blumenthal, and to really get to know the arts in our state. And it really is such a there's such a vibrancy in the arts in North Carolina, and that makes me very proud to live here, and very excited to see what's going to come next. So I hope to get to Theater Charlotte when you reopen.
Absolutely. We welcome you with open arms, and we'll sit you down right up front if you like. So yeah, absolutely. Yes, I agree with you. Just the casting that net, and meeting and chatting with other people that we probably, you know, we've kind of gone out of our bubble during this, which has been very great and informative.
That has been the pandemic silver lining for me, and I think for the audience that has been following these live chats, to be able to take them to places like Theater Charlotte and show them how vibrant the arts are here, and to give them a place to go, put on their bucket list,
right,
travel safely again. So thank you for joining me. The website is there, theatercharlotte.org. If you have goods or services or monies you can donate to rebuild. I was wondering, one of the things I saw in an article about Ron's retirement was, he said the one thing he regretted is he wasn't able to have a facility with more bathrooms. So I'm wondering, in this rebuild, maybe he'll get his wish. Maybe he'll get some more bathrooms.
I know we talk about it, and people are willing to put money towards bathrooms, and we have to sort of, you know, balance that with code issues and other things. But you know, I think it's certainly something that we should certainly look at and consider moving forward. So yeah, maybe he will get his wish.
Thank you for joining me. It's been so great to meet you and get to know you, and I cannot wait to come when things reopen, to come to Charlotte and experience the arts there, because it's truly a vibrant arts city. I know with the Theater Critics Association, Perry Tannenbaum is the critic there, who covers a lot of the theater in Charlotte. So he's talked about how great it is, and I can't wait to come. So
absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Everyone, come back and join me Monday night. I'll be chatting with Mike Wiley, a Triangle favorite. He is going to be performing a show at Raleigh Little Theater and a show at Playmakers in the next month or so. So come back Monday night at 7:30 and join me and Mike. And Chris, just stay safe and healthy, and keep me on your press release list so I can keep pushing out what's happening there at Theater Charlotte.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lauren. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for tuning in. If you tuned in late, this will be available to view in its entirety on Facebook, and it'll be on the website probably this weekend sometime, probably by Sunday. So thanks so much, and we'll see everyone soon. Have a good weekend.